Now, to discuss the recent inaugurations in Senegal and Egypt, we're now being joined by Dr. Nicholas Idris Erameh, Senior Research Fellow at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Dr. Erameh, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me here.
It's a pleasure. Yeah. On one hand, LCC is celebrating his third term that will end in 2030 and making promises. Let's start with him. Based on his track record so far with his first 2 terms, are you taking to heart or taking him seriously based on what he's saying he will do during this new term?
Yeah, I think that's, first I want to say congratulations to him, but I want to say at times we always face with this problem of matching the theory and practice about what politicians say and what they end up doing. But give and take, I would say that given that he's ruled the country for 2 terms now, and this is his last term, so every chance is that he must have learnt a lot of mistakes, where he had made some mistakes, where there are glaring problems in the country, and how he thinks that he could improve given this is his last chance in office.
All right, let's go to Senegal. Yeah. And of course, right now, a lot of conversation around Senegal is around the partnership between the President Bassirou Faye, and of course, Ousmane Sonko as his Prime Minister. Yeah. Now, let's look at the historical antecedent. If you look at Congo, Patrice Lumumba and Mobutu had a relationship. They were best friends, and Patrice Lumumba appointed Mobutu, who later betrayed him and oversaw his overthrowing and his assassination. Then you go to Burkina Faso. Blaise Compaoré, Thomas Sankara, also best friends, but Blaise Compaoré was a person who made sure that there was a coup against Thomas Sankara. The best friendship, the bromance partnership between Ousmane Sonko and Diomaye Faye. What are your thoughts on it? Is it something sustainable? Is it something that can work?
Well, I think it's something that can work. One, and though you have listed 2 cases, that doesn't necessarily mean that Senegalese case would go that other way. It could also go that way, and it might not go the other way around. But much is expected from President Faye, and what it also means is that if that is going to be avoided, it should depend the extent to which it's able to bring Senegal back to limelight, walk the talk. Because there's so much expectations from the regime. And I don't want to be dissuaded with the issue about age, and I don't want to be carried away about his age and other things and his long history of activism, because I think he's now the president. So it's time to work. Right, but it's a good thing again that he also trusts Sonko for now, and he feels that
for now,
and he thinks that he needs some close allies who have like minds, which is very important in politics, right? So he feels they have the same orientations, and they feel the same problem about Senegal, and he also feels that they could address that problem collectively. So for now, we need to give them that space and give them that hope and time and see what comes out from that relationship.
Well, you were rather kind with what you expressed about your expectation about, from Egypt, the Egyptian president, third time's a charm in this case. But there are some critics that are saying that this looks like a case of undermining democracy. I'll just take it from here. They're saying that this violates the principles of democratic transitions of power and sets a very dangerous precedent for future leaders to extend their rule indefinitely. Do you see that playing out in this case?
Yeah, actually, I do see that playing out in this case. But sometimes if you also look at the nature of democracy in Africa and what democracy is expected to be, then look at the practice side by side, all these things, we see that to some extent we would want to say that we are democratizing, even though in a very slow process. So while in some cases we have celebrated successes of successful transitions, in some of these cases you have issues of tenure elongation, and that was almost the case in Senegal before the Constitutional Court came to the rescue. So if that is the case now in Egypt, well, what can we say? We can't tell SSRM to step down. The only thing we can talk about now is that how does he ensure that there are a lot of reforms to ensure that such do not come to be one. Two, most of all these issues are also issues not, I mean, they're issues that we cannot solve individually. They're issues that we can also sort at the regional level. So it means that there's also a regional pressure about such, disdain for tenure elongation. Most leaders would not want to follow that track. And let's not also forget that if we follow track, that most of these leaders themselves, they have come to become so comfortable about sit-tight syndrome, autocracy, and tenure elongations. So we need to talk about that. And let's not also forget the whole Western angle to SSC's presidency. But I think that with time, gradually, we could, address those issues and get to where we're going to.
Let's talk about sit-tight presidencies.
Yeah.
The two common factors that we have between Senegal and Egypt, besides the fact that Senegal almost went into a third term as well, is the fact that their presidential tenure is 6 years. Yeah. Now, of course, here in Nigeria, we look at 4 years. Some other African countries, Zimbabwe, for example, looks at 5 years. Yeah. At that range, where do you think is the appropriate place for us to set term limits from 4 years to 6 years? Because it almost seems like once you have a 6-year term, then you do a second one. You've been in there for over a decade. Don't you think the tendency is to want to make sure you're comfortable enough and you want to prolong that? Are you for shorter terms or for longer terms?
Well, I agree with that. That narrative, because when someone stays, when a president stays too long in the office, it creates an impression that he's become unchallenged, right? Or even if he's going to do that, then with age, so many factors come to play. One of the factors is, I rather want to die in office instead of being pushed out of office. So we need shorter terms, but of course, guided by the Constitution. Because even if you say a president could rule for just a year, if some of these challenges we are facing, we could also face them. So it's not enough to say we need a short term or longer term. We need to ensure that regimes, these issues about regime, tenure of office and presidency is solely guided by the Constitution. And we ensure that parties to this, ensure that they also play with what the Constitution dictates.
What is your biggest concern, if any, regarding some of the challenges that the Senegalese president might face? Of course, he's made history. We're happy for him. But are you looking at it and just, maybe even saying a prayer for him regarding some of the challenges that you might see? What's the top that you're most concerned about?
Yeah, I think that, like I said, I really feel for the gentleman, because one of the top issues he's going to face is that, don't forget that in the build-up to the elections, there had been a whole lot of social issues in Senegal, issues of youth unemployment, right? Issues of migration, issues of increasing poverty, economic instability. So one of the greatest problems is that, don't forget that it was also brought into office with a large section of the youth. So that factor itself is going to be the extent to which it's able to address the core challenges of the youth itself would go a long way to say how long he enjoys his office. And I think that is his greatest challenges.
So the appointment of Sonko, do you think that helps his case?
Well, like we already said, and would already discuss about that, I think it's going to help his case a bit. But again,
regarding that particular challenge.
that particular challenge one, and I think that this election itself, the election is over. It's time to build Senegal. This gives him the opportunity to bring everybody on board. Yeah, it gives him the opportunity to bring everybody on board. And the good thing about it is that he's winning an election not being brought in from a particular godfather. So he has all the freedom, to assign roles or to pick people he feels that can work together, and to ensure that even the youth population, he drags them into the governance stream to ensure that, one, things are working in Senegal, and two, to ensure that Senegal still remains what it used to be, the beacon of democracy in Africa, particularly amidst the issues of coups, a resurgence of coup within Francophone countries in that region.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned this wave of uprisings and coups happening within the region, especially within the ECOWAS region, because some might argue that a lot of it is happening because those citizens and those people are tired of the overbearing attitude that France has towards them and the over-involvement, if I may use that word, that France has with their affairs. Now, one of the promises of this incoming administration in Senegal is to start cutting those ties with the French. In doing so, do you think he's going to have to ally more with the military and coup leaders in the rest of the region? Because it seems the democratic leaders in the region are still being accused of being very linked to imperialist ties. How does he manage that?
Yeah, honestly, it's going to be a very dicey situation, but there are always ways out of it. One, they fall within Francophone countries, so they have some peculiar problems they share among themselves, right? And they also understand how they have been running the system within those regions, which gives them an edge about that one. So how then does it ensure that, how then does it work with this and France? And if you listen carefully to his speech, even though he talked about removing the vestiges of French colonialism, he said it in a more radical way. He said it's going to take faces, and and in all sincerity, that is what it should be, because this is not a relationship of 5 years. This is a long-term relationship. So what I expect him to do is to have short-term and long-term goals of how to disengage from French from Senegal and other countries. But at this point, it means that he also needs those, either we call those regimes democratic regimes or undemocratic regimes. For now, what is at stake is that what the current regimes or those leaders there are people the citizens says they want. So for now, we have to deal with that problem. They have to also come together to say, okay, this is how we want to do it, because it's not going to be, if they're going to address issues of French domination, it should not be a Senegal thing alone. It has to be all countries faced with similar challenges and seeing how they could forge a way, particularly the issues of economy, currency, political dominations, and even all of that aspects.
As we round up with you, let's talk about what critics are saying about the potential suppression of opposition in Egypt. They're saying that questions might be asked about the treatment of political opponents and also CSOs and independent media during the president's tenure, whether this third term would further curtail dissenting voices and opposition. How do you think that could be worked around? Quickly, please.
Honestly, in terms of repression, I think the regime has become notorious for that.
Yeah.
And that is not in any way helping democratic tendencies in Egypt and even within neighboring countries, because such could also have contagious effects about some other countries. And that is why people keep on saying that there's a need for more political reforms in Egypt. It's not a matter of whether the new president likes it or not. No, it is that there's need to open up the political space to ensure, one, tolerance for dissenting voices, two, to ensure more participation, and three, to ensure that there's equality, there's respect for human rights, there's freedom, and also judicial freedoms, because all these things themselves come with democracy. So it's not enough to look at democracy from transition from one regime, from one regime to the other, or one tenure to the other. We need to also look at other aspects of democracies, which are very, very more vital in terms of trying to measure a nation that is democratizing. Yeah.
Dr. Nicholas Idris Erameh, thank you so much. This has been such an insightful conversation. We could have gone on and on for a while, but this is very informative. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.